All right, settle down, settle down. It's time to get started. We got a lot to do tonight. We got a good presentation. We don't want to short shrift any our presenters, so let's get moving. Okay. Please, if you can, do a self check-in. The code for the self check-in is Victor Lima. Victor Lima. So please go ahead and do that so it makes it easier for the secretary to be able to keep track of who attends the meetings. When we get to the board of directors elections, you will understand why that is just so important. Wow, how about that? I got animations somehow. I don't know how I did that, but I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. You might as well come up here, Larry, because the next thing is you. All right, thanks everybody. You're going to ask our Vice President, Mr. Land, here to tell us about our presenters tonight.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For your presentation pleasure tonight, we have a couple of distinguished members of the ham radio hobby. First off, I think we're going to hear a person named Aliyah. I'm sorry, I let the name out. And then there's also going to be a Jesse. I don't have much on Aliyah, but Jesse was licensed in 75 as a VE member of IEEE Professional Communications, and he does all types of local INCOM, MCOM, emergency communication, CERT, etc. Call sign is Whiskey Bravo 2 India Foxtrot Sierra, and Aliyah is I believe she just got a license. Her license is Kilo Quebec 4 Mary Hotel Bravo. Okay. What else? What else can I mention? Here's the deal. Anybody here like antennas? Sure, everybody likes antennas. How about big antennas? Okay. Got a yes back here. How about a whole bunch of big antennas? Okay, I said big. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Aliyah.
You guys are on.
Hello.
There she is.
Yeah,
Hi.
we hear you.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Yep. 5 by
Hi.
9.
Cutting my camera on. Can you guys see me? Hi.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
It's a good thing that I cut my camera on real quick because then I can hear that there's sounds going on. Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate everyone for allowing me to speak about the VLA. It's a really cool telescope. It's a big telescope, as your vice president mentioned. So I'm really excited to talk about it. And again, my name is Aliyah Wofford. So I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen. Oh no. All right. And can everybody see the top of my screen? Well, let's move these float controls real quick.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. Well, welcome. So I will be giving you guys a virtual VLA tour. Again, my name is Aliyah Wofford. How do I go forward? Yes. Again, my name is Aliyah Wofford. I just recently got my call sign. So again, it is KQ4MHB. I am a NAC student, meaning that I'm a part of the National Astronomy Consortium. So I worked at Charlottesville, Virginia, doing projects working with the VLA when I was throughout my undergrad and in some of my post-bac career. So essentially, when I finished my undergraduate's degree, I went and did some work at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in between time before attending graduate school. And now currently I am a third-year PhD student at George Mason University, and I am I'm concentrating in climate dynamics, with a specialty in astrobiology and paleoclimatology. So that's just a little bit about me. So just a few housekeeping rules. This presentation will last approximately 1 hour. It probably won't be as long, but just I'll on record typically I've timed myself at about 45 minutes with time for questions. So there is the Zoom feature, of course. There will be time at the end of the presentation for dedicated questions. So please feel free to use the chat box, or if you want to use the raise your hand function, please feel free to do so. And, of course, again, use the chat function again if you have any technical difficulties, just to let me know. And again, any links that you see in the presentation, I will post them so that you can see them, so that you'll be able to see them later. So another thing here is that, so this is actually a screenshot of the National Radio Astronomy Observatory's website. So if there are questions that you have, so if I can't get to every question, we have this nice little function where you're actually able to ask an astronomer. So our astronomer is Dr. Jeff Mangum, and he's the staff scientist on duty who actually takes these questions, and that if you have one, you can just simply go into your archives and you can search for a topic and ask your questions correctly. Ask your questions directly to him. They usually get to them, depending on how their workload is, about between 72 hours roughly is how long it takes them to turn around for you to get answers. And also I did want to mention, if you do the search the archives, we catalog all the questions that have been previously asked before. So if there's something specific, it might already be asked as well. So I do encourage you guys to look at the archives if there are questions that you have. So just a brief history. So the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, or NRAO, was founded in 1956, and it had the goal of providing a design and build and operate and maintain the state-of-the-art radio telescopes. These telescopes study radio light, which is a type of light, invisible light to our eyes that we are not able to see, that comes to us from space. Currently, the partnership, as far as NRAO, operates 3 major observatories, one being the Very Large Array, or the VLA, the Very Long Baseline Array, or the VLBA, and the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array, known as ALMA. And of course, these large observatories are funded by the National Science Foundation. So as I mentioned before, our talk today is mostly going to focus on the VLA, but just going to give you a brief background of each, and then we'll get back to some of the more specifics about the VLA as we proceed through the presentation. So the VLA is found in New Mexico. It consists of approximately 28 antennas, but use 27 at any given time. Each antenna is approximately 90 feet tall, or about 10 feet, or about 10 stories. The dishes are about 82 feet, are 25 meters in diameter. The antennas are at a latitude of about 34 degrees north, which allows us to see about 80% of the sky in the northern hemisphere, while the remaining 20% of the sky that we don't see is just because it's too low, it's too southward on the equator for us to see it. And that these telescopes the telescope is located in the plains of San Augustine, New Mexico, which happens to be an ancient lake bed in the New Mexican desert. So that's just a brief history about the VLA that we'll be talking more about. But another one that we also have, again, is the second. The VLBA is the Very Long Base Array, and essentially it consists of 10 VLA-sized antennas that are scattered across North America, which when you combine them together, they act like one telescope. So these are actually all of the radio telescopes that are all over the place. And essentially, what you can do with these is that you're basically almost using the planet as an entirely huge, a very large telescope, essentially. And the way that we do that is that while you can't build dishes large enough on the ground surface to get everything, you want to have multiple different types of antennas stationed all over the country, so that way you can use them. So that way you can actually see more of the sky and you get more resolution. So instead of having a bunch of smaller dishes spread everywhere, you can multiply all of their signals together and basically simulate one giant eye on the continent. And that's how you get this very long base array. So that's just a little bit about it. And that actually of the VLBA, two of these telescopes or antennas, one is in Los Alamos, which is northwest of Santa Fe in New Mexico, and the other one is in Pie Town, which is about 40 minutes west of the VLA. So but these are all of the different ones that consist of the VLBA. And then, of course, the third one that is also operated by NREO is the Atacama Large Submillimeter Array, or known as ALMA, which is stationed in Chile. And essentially, this is a counterpart to the Southern Hemisphere. So this is the only array that you actually have that's in the Southern Hemisphere. So that other 20% of the sky, we can actually use the sub-ALMA to actually look at that. And essentially that ALMA has a total of about 66 dishes, which is about 12 meters, just under 40 feet in diameter. And a few of them are about 7 meters in diameter, so half the size of VLA's antennas at the most. So so that's just a little bit about some of the telescopes. So you have ALMA, VLA, and VLBA. But back to the VLA, which is stationed in New Mexico. The VLA was constructed in 1980. It started construction in 1970, and was completed and dedicated on October 10th, 1980. The region where the telescope was built is about 7,000 feet, or about 2,150 meters above sea level. In general, when you want to build these types of telescopes, you want them to be relatively at high elevations, and with very low humidity, or like what they like to say is high and dry. As you know, when with the telescope, things like moisture, as well as moisture and things in your atmosphere can distort and bend your light. So in order to mitigate those things, we like to have our telescopes at very high elevations and in very dry areas. And then another thing I wanted to point out about this picture of the VLA, which is again in Plain St. Augustine in New Mexico, is that if you look here, this entire region, I don't know if you can see my cursor, is actually surrounded by mountains. And this is a really nice feature for us because these mountains spread go all the way around the telescope. And that in turn helps to actually block out we use it as a natural shielding from blocking out interference, whether that comes from Wi-Fi, cell phones, radio stations from other cities. And in general, because the VLA is so sensitive, if we didn't have this, we could actually pick up signals as far as Albuquerque from where the telescope is, as well as surrounding cities as well. So the sensitivity is very strong to be able to get those types of signals. So the big question is, how do we operate these telescopes? How do we operate the VLA? So as I mentioned previously, the VLA consists of 28 dishes, 27 of which we use at any given time. So there's the 28th one, which is actually we keep in the antenna barn, which is usually up for maintenance, while the other 27 are being used. And so so in general, you have like the 28th one will typically be in maintenance or something if we need to just swap them out and things like that. And then the control building is where essentially all the magic happens. That's where where your operators are moving and directing the telescopes, putting them into their configurations, and which I'll get more into detail about as we're going. And that mostly the dishes are arranged in what's called a Y shape, which we'll talk more about in just a sec. So this is just pictures of the VLA configurations. So the VLA antennas, they sit on 3 sets of railroad tracks, which they're like in person. I wish that I had my own pictures, but they're huge. And that essentially they're arranged in what you're seeing here as in a Y shape that I mentioned before. And it consists of a northwest and an eastern arm. The west and eastern arms are about 13 miles of double railroad tracks on each side to move them, whereas the north arm is the shortest with only 11 miles. And the funny story about that, the reason why the northern arm is actually the shortest is because if you look over here, it's hard to see in the picture, there's actually a ravine there. And so back when they were constructing the VLA, instead of trying to, since it was so expensive to have to build a bridge over the ravine, they just said, you know what, we're just going to cut it off 11 miles. That's it. So that's why the northern arm is shorter than the rest of them. And then there are a total of 72 antenna stations on these arms. So it's great. It would be great if you have while in the, excuse me. But essentially, if you have, we have a total of 72 antennas stations. And in a perfect world, it would be great if we had, 72 of those antennas. But unfortunately, because of funding, the best we could do was 28. So that's why you don't see all of that's why you don't see antennas at every one of the stations. And so the other thing is that when you move the 27 antennas around, you have 9 antennas that are present on each arm, and that when you can actually rearrange them in different stations to put them closer together or farther apart. And they have there are 4 major configurations that I'll get to as we're talking. And that in turn, it's almost like a zooming in and zooming out is you move them close together or further apart. So when these are pictures of the 4 major configurations that typically the VLA is in at any given time. So the A configuration, also how we like to remember, is a long way away, is its farthest away configuration, and that essentially, if you were to draw a circle on the outer edges of the antenna, you would get about 22 miles or 36 kilometers in diameter, and that this configuration is where the telescope is the most zoomed in. So this is where you will have your highest resolution when you're looking at the sky. And then you have, of course, your B configuration, which is a little closer together. And that one's approximately 7 miles in diameter, or 11 kilometers in diameter as well. And then you have your C, which is even closer, which is about 2 miles in diameter, or 3.5 kilometers. And then last, the darn too close configuration, or your D configuration, is your smallest configuration, where you can get the telescopes the antennas as close together. And this is and then that one, your diameter is about 1 kilometer, or about 0.6 miles apart from each other. And that in this configuration, this is when your telescope is the most zoomed out. So this in turn will allow you to see more larger structures, but you won't really get like the defining details or anything like that. So A is your zooming out, is your most zoomed in, and configuration D is your most zoomed out. And this is just a above ground look at what you would see if you were in a drone, essentially what the configurations look like. So as I mentioned before, the way it reads is that it reads from DCBA. So your closest configuration is that small target. That's where your antennas will be if they were in a D configuration in its most zoomed out mode. And then the next ring out would be your C. And then, of course, your B is this one. And then your farthest one, which is where you get your most resolution, which is the biggest one, is your A configuration. So this is just showing you what that would look like if you were like above the VLA, and you were seeing a specific configuration. So the other thing I mentioned, as I said before, that the configurations all resort to different resolutions. And so this is just an example of some of how the image differences between configurations. So as I mentioned before, when you look at configuration A, which is on your left top corner, you can see that you have a little bit more structure being shown throughout of what the astronomer was looking at. Whereas if you looked at configuration B, which is on this next slide, you can see that it's still good resolution, but it's not as detailed. Like you can't see like the jets from the star or anything like that, or the clouds, excuse me. And of course, once you start to move down into your resolution or zooming out further and further, you see larger structures, but not really any finite details. And typically what most astronomers they often like to use many different configurations to look at the same object, just to sort of get a sense of what's going on. It just all depends on what you're studying. And then, so the other big question that we always get is, how do we move the antennas? Well, we move these antennas essentially with these huge red basically railroad runners known as transporters that they move along, they move the antennas along to get to their configuration. They've been customly built, custom made, and they carry these, they carry each antenna to their to respective antenna stations. And they're approximately about the 230 ton for antenna is what each antenna weighs. And that they just slide underneath of them and they pick them up. And then they sort of carry them down the tracks and put them down at the next station. So the other good news about each antenna station is that we don't have to carry any type of cables or any type of hookups, because each antenna station has already been configured with all of the cables and cords needed to use the antennas. So all we have to do is move them down and then plug them into the said antenna station, and you're good to go do your observations. These transporters, as they're transporting, they move at a maximum speed of only about 5 miles per hour or 5 miles per hour. And when they're carrying the antennas, they go about 1 to 2 miles per hour for safety purposes, because these are very expensive instruments and we don't want to break them. And that the other thing is they don't move the antennas if the wind speeds are higher than 20 miles per hour. And even when you're moving the antennas, the other good thing about it is that the antennas can still observe. So they have like what's called the 3 antenna rule. So as long as there are three of the 27 operational antennas are plugged up, you cannot at any given time, they can still actually take the observations, which typically makes a lot of the astronomers and scientists very happy that they can still do that when they're moving configurations. And then this here is where our data is collected, also known as the VLA receivers, or aka our feed horns. So as you can see, these feed horns are what basically captures all of the radio light that we're looking at, and that's what is taking in all of the data. So another big question is, how can you actually use the VLA? So anybody can actually use it from any country, even you guys, if you guys are interested in looking at using the VLA to look at to survey the sky. And it's no charge. The main thing is that typically is that they ask that you have to submit a proposal. The proposal is basically you explaining what you're looking at, what configuration you want to use, and why it would benefit the scientific community. For every hour of observing time, they get about 4 hours worth of proposals. So we don't have to pick, so they have to pick and choose. So lots of applications. And the way that they grade these proposals, they have a panel of astronomers who've used the VLA, and they read the proposals and then prioritize them based on high grade, means that they're basically guaranteed telescope time. A middle grade means that you might be able to observe, or if there's time left of your chosen configuration. And after that, the lower grade means you probably won't be able to observe this time, but you can resubmit again in the future. And different configurations may be more or less in demand at different times, depending on what's currently happening in the sky. So typically, and another thing I wanted to mention, a current breakdown of how many proposals submitted. 50% of them are of the users that submit proposals who get time on the VLA are from the US, whereas the other 50% is from the rest of the world. So that's pretty good that you have pretty even chances that it really means that anybody can use it. And typically, when they do have submissions for proposals, they get about 4 times the applications than they can actually approve. So as you can imagine, I'm sure the panel is buried in paperwork all the time. So when you can apply, so in order to apply to use that time, you have to basically do it in cycles. So if astronomers want to use all the configurations, they have to submit 4 proposals, because the proposals are structured so that you have based on what configuration is going to be going on when, so the A, B, C, or D. So if an astronomer wanted to use the VLA and they wanted to do their observations with all of the configurations, they would have to submit 4 individual proposals for those cycles so that they would be able to get their time. And then, so let's say that you've been given the time to observe. So what happens then is that you have what's known as the data analysts, who are really nice and really awesome support staff for the VLA, and that they use their computer programming to help you write codes and scripts for the antennas during your observations. And then once you finish with that, you then have to send the script, they'll then send your scripts to what's known as the operators. And the operators are basically the ones that control the telescope at all times, and that basically they'll put your script into queue after they collect all the scripts, and then when it's time for your observations to occur, then the scripts will pop up on the screen and they will run them, and that will start to collect antennas will start to collect your data, and then from that the data travels from your antennas to the correlator, and then our supercomputers that will process and combine all the data from the different antennas to simulate one big antenna. And then once the correlator has finished with all of that, it will inform the operator, who will send you an email with the link so you can download your raw data. So that's pretty much just a nutshell in how that all happens. So you just have to write your scripts up. Operators have to run the scripts, get your data, and then they send you email saying, hey, we have your data, and they send it to you. And once that data actually gets to you, it is proprietary, meaning that it will not be accessible to the public for a year. So you can take all of that data that they send to you. It's all the raw data. You'll be able to cut and splice and make plots and do analysis on it. And you have dibs on it for the entire year. But once that expiration of the year happens, they then move all of that data, the raw data, not anything that people use for their papers, but just the raw data itself, to the public archive, so that other scientists and other people who are interested in those objects can access them and use that raw data as well. So what else I was about to say? So another thing is that if the proposal to the VLA is denied, there are other ways, like in the sense that, say if somebody applies and say they didn't get the time, they always highly encourage you to look at the public archives to maybe find data that if you're trying to help with your project, to maybe find somewhat similar data, because there is a lot in the archive. So that's another alternative. And then also another reason why they also encourage the archives is that if you find the data that you're looking for, it does kind of mitigate you from having to do the whole proposal process again, and because you can use the data that's already publicly available on the servers. So that's just another thing to think about. And this here is a picture of the control room. So this is where, again, what people are seeing in the control building. This is where the operators are. This is what they're seeing when they actually are taking your data. The operators are act as what you would consider as your managers of the VLA. So they typically are there. They're during the weekdays. They are the maintenance staff when the maintenance staff is working on the antennas, they coordinate with the operators during and after work. Operators have to monitor the weather condition. They monitor the weather conditions. They keep track of any potential hazards. They contact the scientists if there's something wrong with the antenna. So if there's something going on, if it's in the dead of night, they call the on-staff or the on-call scientist, hey, something's wrong with the telescope. And then someone has to drive up to VLA and take care of it. So that can be very fun at times. Getting a call at 2:00 in the morning to see what's going on with the telescope. So I can imagine that can be fun at times. And also when they also have the operators have to are on site. The operators are always on site. They have one on site every 24/7, and they work 363 days minus the 4 days out of the year. And the operators work in shifts of 8 hours. So 8 hours meaning 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., 4 p.m. to 12 a.m., and 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. And they, when there's issues or anything they need to check on with the VLA, they use NRO staff vehicles to drive out to the site, since the control room is closer to is a building. So if there's something going on with the telescope, or if they see something on the cameras, they can actually take one of the vehicles and drive straight to the telescope from their control center. From the control room. Another cool thing, well, not cool, but it's interesting, is that they also are acting security. So if there are, people who are kind of sneaking around, or if locals or a coyote, I guess, gets in the area, they're the ones that sort of deal with that. So interesting things you'll see out there in the VLA. But the other thing is that they drive, they tour, they watch the site, they drive for 1 hour to get there and then 1 hour back. So they work about 10 hours a day, 4 days a week typically. And lastly, so as I mentioned before, the VLA was built in 1980 and it was a state-of-the-art telescope at the time. But as you know, with telescopes, as technology has started to advance more, so has the technology. And so by the time we reached the 1990s, the VLA was already beginning to fall behind technologically. So in the late 2001, NRAO has started a new project where they were planning to upgrade the VLA, where they've gutted out most of all of the old technology inside the antennas and replaced it with newer stuff, like replaced it with a new supercomputer, receivers, receivers that for the data that are more powerful, and they also went digital, because before that it was more so analog and things like that. And that this happened approximately, this initiative took place, that was completed in 2012. And it's now the telescope at this point in time is 10 times more powerful telescope than it once was back in the 1980s. And so now what we're thinking about is that they want to add more to this, known as the next generation VLA or the NGVLA. And essentially it's a hope that they're hoping to have antennas that are smaller, that are smaller than our current ones, that are going to be about 18 meters to 59 feet. But they'll have over 200 of them that are spread out throughout the state of New Mexico and into other states. And that'll help to create a more powerful telescope. So this is what this kind of looks like. So this is like the vision for it. So as you can see in the right corner, you can see that this is like where the NGVLA is, but these are what these little antennas are. These are what the antennas are like around it that they would like to create. And then as you zoom out further, you can see there's somewhat of a configuration as you're going out, and in turn that'll create it's going to create a more powerful telescope. And then here, this is just showing you what it would look like zoomed out. And again, as I mentioned before, it will transcend from New Mexico but into like other states as well. But of course, with all new great adventures, there's need for money. So that's another big thing. But we do know is that we will, while this next generation VLA will be slated for decades of work to come. The first prototype, which is the good news, is that the first prototype for one of the antennas will actually be complete in 2025. So hopefully, if you guys keep up with the NGVLA as well as the NRAO's website, you'll be able to just sort of see how that progress is going. So at this time, I just want to say shouts out to NRAO, thanks to the National Science Foundation as well as AEY, and I will take your questions at this time.
All right. Do we have any questions in the room here? Yes, Bob.
I can't.
So Leah, the question in the room here is how are you getting the data from the antennas back to either the control room or the data storage system where it's consolidated?
So what happens is that when the telescope, let me go back. So as I mentioned before, when you are getting the signal, so all of the signal gets funneled into this feed horn, which is here. And then from there, all of that signal goes straight to our computers and the supercomputer. And that's where all the data is sort of reduced and processed to. But essentially everything gets funneled.
Yeah, the question is, how does it get from the feed horn to the supercomputer?
So
is that done via cable? Is it wireless? How's that happening?
I believe it's via cable. That's what I believe it is. Yeah.
Okay, so that would mean that at each position where one of these antennas could be stationed, there's a connection point where it would be cabled into to some subterranean structure.
Yes. So as I mentioned before, each of the antenna stations have cables already hooked up inside. So the 72 stations that are there. So in particular, when you have one of them hooked up, it automatically already has a cable that sort of that takes all that data. that will move it.
All right. Yeah, that answers the gentleman's question. Any other questions? Ron? What frequency ranges are these antennas receiving?
They can go from anywhere between 1 to 50 gigahertz.
1 to 50 gigahertz, Ron.
Yes.
Yeah, the comment was that based on that, we're assuming that a lot of the as opposed to actually cables within the antennas, we think you're probably using a lot of waveguides in order to move the RF around.
Mm-hmm. I would have to double check, but I see what you're saying though. I would have to double check.
Actually, we got a question from Ginger here. What's your question, Ginger? Do you know what percentage of the time the array is in each different configuration? So, out of 100%, is it 20% of the time in A, 50 in B? I mean, how is that distributed?
So with the configurations, they do them in cycles. From what I've seen is that sometimes it really is just dependent on what's up in the sky. But I've seen where they've had configurations they've had some the VLA in a specific configuration, like the Y configuration, for 8 days at a time. So that's like, I've seen that happen before, but I wouldn't know how long they do in cycles, but the longest that I've seen is 8 days.
Do you think the website would show a distribution of that?
I don't think the website would, but I have resources for staff scientists as well as others that could also give you that information.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ron. All right, here's the big question. What's the annual budget to run all of this, Aaliyah?
That is above my pay grade.
Yeah. It was kind of a snotty question anyway, so we get it.
Yeah, it's a lot. I'll say a lot.
Fair enough. Donald.
Was the VLA used to image Sagittarius A, the black hole center of our galaxy?
Was the VLA used to image Sagittarius A, the black hole at the edge of our galaxy? Center, sorry.
So no, so the VLA was not used to do that, but other telescopes so those were like things like Hubble and others that did that. We didn't do that.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry. The question is that, hey, it's been referred to as both an antenna and a telescope. Is it really both, or we just using the terms interchangeably?
So the VLA itself, so you can think of this is the VLA, and each of those dishes are the antennas.
Right. And can we then say that the array itself, when it's put together, creates the telescopic function?
Typically I call when you're talking about the collective, you could say, yes, this is a telescope. But if you were looking at hey, can you move antenna 1? It's an antenna. So like if you're saying, can you move this antenna, I don't know, like the word itself, antenna over, then that would be when you refer to it as antenna. But as a collective, all of the antennas put together is the telescope.
Very good. Thank you. Lewis. Okay, so the question is, how different is the Very Large Array from what was done at the Arecibo Observatory? And then a follow-on question was, did the loss of Arecibo impact the community significantly?
Gotcha. So the first part is so Arecibo is the one that was in Puerto Rico. Arecibo, we don't run that one, but it was a very important instrument for us. that a lot of people did use. So it was a devastating loss to lose that telescope. The differences between Arecibo is that Arecibo is essentially a huge dish. So you can think of it as one giant pixel on the ground. Whereas, so like if you were using Arecibo essentially can see just one pixel in the sky. And it will show you that. Whereas the very large array, depending on your configurations, has more flexibility. So, and to have higher resolution when you move it outward versus if you move it inward. Whereas the Arecibo is kind of like, since it kind of just sort of twirls like I'm using my hands like a bowl, like it twirls. So it doesn't, so you can like move it to see one big pixel at the sky, one big pixel at the sky, whereas the others you kind of can move, you have more free range as to where you can look in the sky.
Thanks. Did I answer your question, Liz? Charlie. Okay, so the question from the room here is, are there ever circumstances where an observation is interrupted and the array is immediately reconfigured due to some unforeseen or high priority need that arises?
No, not for high priority things like that. No, typically it's usually a set cycle. The only time that the observations are stopped or interrupted is if there's weather inclement, things like that. If there's high wind speeds, they will close the antennas or move them into a closer configuration to and also turn them downward to make sure that they don't get damaged and things like that. So no, they don't. So typically it's not for like high priority things. Those just typically are set by the proposals and things of that nature. But so
very good. Yeah, I'm going to avoid asking the question that came up here a moment ago about aliens, but
well, we do have the Listen project. So there is like, well, it's not with this particular telescope, but with the Green Bank telescope, that's actually something that they do. So that one it's another radio telescope that's operated out of Green Bank, West Virginia. And they've had this, it's called the Listen project, where they essentially are using some GBO time to listen for aliens. I don't know if they've heard anything, but apparently it's been going on since like 2016, and it's the world's largest scale initiative for listening for aliens that I know that telescope was used for. But again, it's the Green Bank one in West Virginia.
yeah, I actually believe that was what the evolution of the SETI project went to that.
Yeah.
All right, Kenneth.
Question.
So what's the distance and control centers itself?
Okay, so the question is the area where the VLA located designated as a radio quiet area?
Yes.
And if so, how large is that area?
So, excuse me. So the radio quiet zone for the VLA essentially would be from this range, from the center of in this lake bed, but all the way to the edge of the mountains, which are actually a few miles back, miles back. So I would have to look up the exact radius, but essentially in this picture, if you were looking, basically the quiet zone ends at the edge of that mountain.
Very good. Yeah, and I believe we've got at least one question from our Zoom participants. Who has their hand raised, Sean? Oh, does somebody on Zoom have a question? Dan, I saw you on mute. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. My question is, what major discoveries have been done with this array system?
So some of the major ones that have been done is that so they found different galaxies. A picture. So the major ones is like this, like some of our more famous pictures like this is actually a star that's here in the middle, and you have these jets of clouds coming from it. So these are some of the unique ones that they've had. They've also had others. So just surveying for different galaxies. I can't think of what each of the names are right about now, but yeah, they've had I'd have to go onto the website and pull up all the different ones that they found that were very good, that were really good.
Okay. Any other questions here in the room? All right, Aaliyah. So the question here in the room is, are you studying for your extra?
Am I studying? Yeah, well, I have to get my general first. But I am planning to go. Yes, I have to. So general. So according to my teacher, Mr. Alexander, he said general starts in January. So that's when that happens, and then hopefully after that we'll do extra.
Very good. Thank you so much for your time. It was a really nice presentation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed doing this with you guys and just sort of, talking up the VLA.
Right.
I hope that you guys get a chance to go and visit there. It has a really nice area. It's dry, it's hot. I think I live on the East Coast and I know people hate our humidity. So definitely if you like the sun and, just kind of just that dry heat, it's really nice. The chili's great. So, yeah. So
here we tried to get to New Mexico during hatch harvest season.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but it's a really nice area. And it's like when I say that the VLA is nothing like I had ever seen before, like when you actually see it in pictures, it looks cool. And even if you've ever seen some of the movies, so if you saw the movie Contact, it was featured in that. Or if you ever saw Transformers Dark of the Moon, which is one of my personal favorites, it was they actually used this telescope in some of their shots. So definitely when if you actually get to see it in person, like I've seen in person, I actually got to touch it, which was cool. I actually didn't expect it to be as large as it was. So yeah, but it's definitely an experience.
All right. Well, thank you, Leah.
Thank you. And I will turn it over to you, Jesse.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to take a lot less time because I have fewer slides, believe it or not, and I should share my screen. Let me share. Got so many. All right, here we go. Share screen. Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Aaliyah. Aaliyah is, I should say, in the interest of full disclosure, just got her call sign. Was it yesterday?
Last Friday.
last Monday, right? She passed the tech. And
it was Friday.
Excellent. So she's part of the NRAO ham radio project, which is what I'm going to talk about the next 5 minutes. This is just what I'm going to cover. This is the bottom line up front. It is a program funded by the ARDC, and a lot of you will recognize them. They've been funding lots of great projects. This is a project that is a 2-year project. We are on year 2. We have 2 cohorts. The first cohort, wave 1, is done. And we actually have 1 student returning from that cohort to work with Aaliyah. She's actually part of the second cohort. So this just gives you the summary of what's going on. We're in the second cohort now, and everyone's getting their technician's license so far. And I'll go into how that's going in a little bit. But this is just the bottom line up front. Like I said, the first cohort is done. Second cohort is in flight. And the next phase of this project after the second cohort, Aaliyah's cohort, is complete. And we got feedback from all the students. We're going to release the project to everyone in the ham radio community to use and including colleges and universities to use. So this is just a timeline showing where we are. We're in the academic, this particular academic year, and we're on the technician part with the Wave 1 cohort. So that's where we are right now. And this just shows what's coming next. After this cohort is done, we're going to review the results and get feedback from people like Aaliyah and other folks in the team, and redesign and rework the curriculum and prepare it for release to everyone, including your group. This is just an overview of the inaugural cohort. Had a lot of fun with those folks. There were 10 students. We also, one of the things the ARDC does is encourages people to work with other organizations that it funds. So we had a chance to work with HAM-SCI, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with them and their projects. We had a chance to go last year, actually this year, and basically I presented that time. What we're hoping to do this coming year, next March at HAM-SCI, is to send some teams, and I will be able to listen as the students present at HAM-SCI. So we're looking forward to that. This just talks about cohort building. That's one of the major parts of this program, is to make sure that we build cohesion and encourage the students to support each other and help each other. These are, again, we're still going on with the accomplishments. This is sort of the thank you page in some ways. We've got lots of support from GLARG. They've really been helping and testing all of our students. Most of the students have been testing remotely, and GLARG has been invaluable. Really appreciate the support. We also receive support from YARC in developing our Discord server, and that's been great. And we're looking forward to working with the Collegiate Amateur Radio Program and other similar programs as our students leave the program and move forward with their ham radio craziness. Right. So more accomplishments for the inaugural cohort. There's an article about the program in August, the August issue of QST, and there was also some information released on QRZ. And this just shows, this picture here is just a screen grab of the learning management system that we're using, which is based on Moodle. The ham radio course is just one of many courses that will be offered in the not too distant future. So this is I like to say this is the slide of acknowledgement for the inaugural cohort. We've got 5 new hams out of that cohort, and there was 1 first contact award. And these are the statistics for cohort number 2. We have 17, 11 have taken the exams. We've got 8 folks with call signs, and there are 2 people who are passing, but they're waiting for the FCC to give them their call signs. So these are the new hams for wave 2. Oops. Oops. All right, so congratulations to them, and look forward to hearing them on the air. I'll just give you a quick look-see at the learning management system that we're using. Like I said, once we finish with this particular cohort, We're going to release this to everyone, and you'll be able to log in and participate and take classes. Not only our class, but other classes as well. So this just gives you a look at what that looks like. All right, so let's get back to the slideshow. So one of the things is we're trying to encourage our students to develop their STEM identities so that they have staying power in the hobby. This, we're just showing that people of color and other folks have been involved in the development of ham radio since the beginning. I have two folks here I wanted to highlight here. This is Jesse Russell. He was my long-term boss at Bell Laboratories in the Wireless Center of Excellence. And these are the folks that created the first cell sites. I worked on the AMPS cellular system, and not surprisingly, there were a whole bunch of hams in that organization. So that organization was led by Jesse Russell. And I also wanted to acknowledge quickly here Ken KB3IIE, who is a silent key, who was involved in multiple emergency communications organizations in this area. So we're just talking about STEM identity. We want young folks to develop their STEM identity. And when I started out this project, I could not find any Black or Latinx women holding a microphone, but fast forward to now, and we've got Rhonda Leonard, who is, from what I understand, an avid DXer on the cover of the general class license manual. And here's also the general class No Nonsense Guide by Dan Romanchek. So we're seeing, this just gives you an overview of the population, the served population in wave 1 and where they're located. And this is the served population in wave 2. And just to give you an idea of the mix and also the geographic diversity. So I just said most of this, so I'm not going to read the slide. And this is basically where we are right now. And we've got a bunch of things that we're excited about. Most of the folks in the class have finished taking their exams. I think there are 1 or 2 that are retesting and 1 more that hasn't had a chance yet to schedule, but we're looking forward to getting through that process, hopefully before there's a government shutdown, if there is one, so that everyone has their call signs, and then we can go on to the next part of the class where we actually require ham radio licenses to do some of the activities. This just shows some changes in language that we're using in our class. Some of the stuff I actually socialized on Mastodon with other hams. We're also using Morse code because folks like Morse code. So I like Morse code. And so a lot of the students are hyped about that, which is a good thing. We're also, what's that?
I am.
Excellent. Yes. So we just had a class. Our latest lesson was an intro to Morse code. So it's just so funny, just being in this hobby as long as I've been in. I started out with Morse code, and then it wasn't required for having a license, and now it's just sort of funny that it's more popular than ever. So I'm not going to be mindful of the time, and I'll just breeze through. I think I've got only 1 or 2 slides left. This is, well, all of you know about emergency communications with things going on with climate change and that kind of thing. There's a lot of interest on the young amongst young people about how to use use radios to help their communities. So, and there's a lot of interest in these activities. And I think I skipped something. Oh yeah, I did talk about citizen science is another thing that is interesting to the students. So with that, that's it. That's all I got. Questions?
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. Any questions in the room? No, I think we're good in the room. How about on Zoom? Are there any questions on the Zoom call? Nope, think you did a great job, Jesse. You got us all educated.
Good, 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 good. I appreciate it. I just want to say thank you to the ham radio community. I have privately and also through NRAO received offers of help, and that's just grand. That just shows you who we are as amateurs, and I really appreciate that. I just want to say thank you. And thanks for having me.
You bet. Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Aaliyah. We really appreciate you taking the time during the evening here.
My pleasure. 7-3.
Happy to help.
All right. Well, we're going to get on with closing up the last of our business here, and thank you so much. Feel free to hang out and listen, or you can drop off, whatever strikes your fancy.
All right. Well, thanks again.
All right. So, as we always do, we've gone through all of our business. Is there any new business that somebody would like to bring to the club from the floor? Well, good. We're doing a great job keeping things going then. So I did want to make a couple of quick announcements. Number one, next meeting, it's Club Christmas Party. Yeah. So there will be a very, very short piece of business because we're going to approve the minutes and everything. 5 minutes, man, tops. 5 minutes. Then we're going to turn it over to Mr. Devance, who has agreed to be our MC again this year. So as usual, the club's going to be providing $500 worth of gifts that we will be giving away to club members on a with a random drawing type of arrangement, kind of like we do for door prizes. We will be doing the gift exchange again. Full rules and guidelines for that be published in the newsletter, but we're going to do the same thing we've done for the last few years, which is, bring a good gift, one that you would expect to get. If you don't want to participate in the gift exchange, fine. Don't bring a gift, hang out, have fun, enjoy. We're also going to be taking up a collection of toys for the Marine Corps Reserves Toys for Tots program. So go ahead, bring a brand new unwrapped toy, and we will make sure that gets delivered to the Marine Corps Reserves. So just bring it to the meeting next month. Again, even if you don't participate in the gift exchange, come to the party. It's a lot of fun. So we have the normal nets that we do. The MARC Sunday information net on Sundays at 8 p.m. on the 2-meter repeater. The Simplex net on Mondays at 146.54 plus or minus, depending on if somebody's already got the frequency. And then we've got our in-person net, which occurs every Saturday morning at Denny's. We get together at about 7 a.m., so, drink coffee, share lies, help each other out. And we've got Laura trained to come take our orders somewhere around the 7:30-ish time frame. Board of Directors meeting is coming up this Saturday, November 18th, Creekwood United Methodist Church, 8 a.m. Anybody that wants to come to the meeting is welcome to. There's nothing secret there. The only reason why we have it outside of this meeting is because we think you guys get pretty bored with all the minutia we got to deal with to run the club. All right, Lewis, I think I'll pick a couple of people because there were hands everywhere. Ginger for the motion, Kiri for the second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Thank you so much, everybody. It was a great meeting.